Hello, everyone. Welcome to your newest episode of the Cosmic Matrix podcast with your host, myself, Laura Matsu, and my husband, Bernhard Günther. So in this episode, we're going to talk, we've titled it actually, CDC says we owe conspiracy theorists an apology, which is a tweet I made this week about the CDC suddenly changing their tune on the COVID-19 guidelines. We're going to talk about what we're seeing in people, the massive kind of wave of complex PTSD and relational trauma that just happened to us, and how we're basically in desperate need of healing and community and relational repair after this. And then we're going to give you some tools for healing some of your relationships that have been affected of this, or potential ways that you can repair your relationships. And in the second hour, we're going to dive deeper and really talk about the spiritual and metaphysical effects of these vaccines, and then what you can possibly do about that as well. So.
All right. Excellent. So the title, excuse me, CDC says we owe conspiracy theorists an apology. So did they say that? Well, they said they made an announcement about a week ago about new COVID-19 guidance lines from the CDC. And I want to quote here NPR, which, of course, as the mouthpiece for the big brother state, Orwellian state, who, by the way, NPR was actually pretty cool maybe 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, I mean, all of these
happened.
things, it's just very weird for people who used to listen to NPR to watch them become like Big Brother. It's insane.
Yeah. So here's they summarize it from the website, from the CDC website. New COVID-19 guidance from CDC focuses on individual decisions.
Yeah.
Hear that?
Yes.
Right? So they give power back to the individual. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So 4 points. Number 1, those exposed to the virus are no longer required to quarantine. So that's a good one. Number 2, unvaccinated people now have the same guidance as vaccinated people.
Yeah, so when I read this line, when I first saw this, I did like a triple take, and I didn't believe, I thought it was extremely dry humor, or I was just entered my own cognitive dissonance, because I just couldn't believe that they would just change their tune like that, especially after they just started vaccinating under 5-year-olds,
Exactly. Yeah, let's not forget how they targeted the children all of a sudden. And number 3, students can stay in class after being exposed to the virus. Wow, that's unheard of. And number 4, it's no longer recommended to screen those without symptoms.
So stupid.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this was crazy to see how they just switched around. And there's this great quote too by Greta Massetti, PhD, MPH, MMWR author. So that tells us that we can trust what she says, because she has all these letters after her name.
That's directly from the CDC webpage.
And she says, I don't even know what an MMWR is.
It doesn't matter. It's impressive. So you need to.
This is a consensus thing. So the letters behind the name give the person importance, and then we should trust her. She's an expert, basically. Okay, and she said, we're in a stronger place today as a nation with more tools like vaccination, boosters, and treatments to protect ourselves and our communities from severe illness and COVID-19. We also have a better understanding of how to protect people from being exposed to the virus, like wearing high-quality masks, testing, and improved ventilation. This guidance acknowledges that the pandemic is not over. We know that COVID-19 is here to stay, but also helps us to move to a point where COVID-19 no longer severely disrupts our daily lives.
So let me translate that from a Big Brother Orwellian doublespeak perspective, right? Because it sounds all nice and good, and the normies or consensus people, as they already try to argue with you on your tweet, says, well, of course, it's no conspiracy. The science has changed, so it's all fine because the CDC says, and and we're not questioning anything. So
No. What they say is that the virus mutated into
that's
one
what I'm
that
trying
was
to say.
easy to
That's what I'm trying to
handle.
say. They're just like, it's just not bad anymore, and that's great news. There's no conspiracy, blah blah blah, and all of that. But what they're also doing here, it's very interesting because from a psychological perspective, they're also what I always call to throw the masses a bone, right? Here, oh, it's all fine and good. We're giving you back your rights. You can go back to quote unquote your normal life and it's not as bad anymore. However, as she says, we know that COVID-19 is here to stay. So it's still in the back of the mind, subliminal imprinted into
That's a good
people.
point,
And they
yeah.
use it still as a way, well, it could erupt at any time again and again. So having said that, what we really want to go deeper into in this topic is, while the official guidelines of COVID-19 have eased up and so on, there are other things that don't go away that quickly and are very well embedded in the psyche of the human population. And that's a trauma installment program, complex PTSD, because of what happened over the past 2 years, let alone the after effects of billions of people who haven't gotten vaccinated. So we'll talk about that. But before we dive into that, I want to really know, what was the tweet again you made about a week ago specifically? Because it went really viral, no pun intended.
Okay, so the tweet was, most popular thing I've ever written, by the way. New CDC guidelines say you owe your conspiracy friend an apology. And that's kind of how I read it. When I read the guidelines, I was like, oh my God, this is they're backtracking. Like how many people lost friends, relationship, jobs, I saw so much damage done to us collectively because of this division around this topic. And like the ugliness that we saw come out in humans because of this topic, we'll never be able to forget that. That was also part of the complex PTSD that I'm going to talk about later. But then, and by the way, I just want to give a nod because a couple years ago, there was like a Kermit meme going around that was like, wake the F up or you're going to owe your conspiracy theorist friend an apology. So my tweet was a riff off of that. I'm not the total original.
Yeah, but
however, I said it at the right moment in time, and I said it related to the CDC guidelines.
But I want to talk about this real quick. So just real quick, just because you're not even very active on Twitter, don't have that many followers, but how many likes or shares did it get?
40,000.
40,000 what?
Yeah.
Likes.
And then
Donald J. Trump kind of like took it from you and made his own tweet, basically saying the same with the guidelines, right?
Yeah, he said, actually, with the guideline, seems to me that the CDC owes your conspiracy theorist friend an apology.
That's Donald Trump Jr.
He totally saw it, for sure. And I'm actually glad that he didn't retweet it because, like, the last thing...
you'd be slammed.
Yeah, even on that tweet, actually, I did see quite a few ugly comments. Although I have to say... the large majority were like laughing their asses off. And some people were also like, I'm never going to forget this. I lost my job. This was insane. I could see the relational trauma in the replies as well. Because people are like, I mean, the ugliness that really came out of some people towards their friends, like it was awful. It was really, I think we made a podcast about this like way back in the thick of it, like how to witness a collective shadow with an open heart. And that's what we saw, actually. So much shadow material come out of our family, friends, just everyone, left and right, like this awful stories that you hear. I mean, I know people who had family disown them because of many people actually who had family disown them over this decision. And, it was really wild to be in the thick of it because throughout this whole thing, we were also doing group coaching with people who were struggling with family, disowning them, not wanting to speak with them, disinviting them to family weddings, family gatherings, just over this alone. And that they would turn against like people they've known for decades, people they loved, just because the government told them to. That's the most terrifying part of this. And I think that's really traumatized people as well.
Yeah, I think, and also on a positive note, looking at this viral post, I think more and more people have now started to question it or are fed up with it and just don't go along with it. I've seen from many people who first believed it, they turn around. I've seen many vaccinated people regretting it and all of that. I've seen it also within my family turning around and all, but it's not that easy. I think as we go deep into that, some relationships can be repaired, right? But others definitely not. And that's just part of also the evolution of conscious understanding the trajectory within the splitting of humanity.
That's just part of life too. Like we have this idea that like you're supposed to be friends with people until the day you die. And while that's amazing when that happens, it's just not the case, especially if you're a growth-orientated individual. And if you're orientated towards growth, like you may outgrow people at a faster pace than before, you know, people from high school, people used to know, but then also you might be surprised at the people who grow with you as well. So it's kind of like a double-edged thing.
You know, it's interesting too. On that note, I saw some people who are completely caught up by this Wetiko mass psychosis virus, that mind control program, that they go against the new CDC guidelines, like, oh no, we cannot just open up right now. We still need to double mask. We still everybody needs to get their shots. They're so ironically, first they were conditioned by the CDC, and then they take on this belief system. They become deeper entrenched in them with their own fear, paranoia, this extreme trauma response. And now the source that told them, that installed into that, kind of tells them to ease up. You can go along your lives, and like, no, we can't.
Because
that's a self-inflicted Stockholm syndrome.
Well, yeah, and it's an adaptive trauma response, which is a key element of complex PTSD. Is that in order to survive difficult experiences, you develop almost like this trauma-based personality that served you like maybe a while ago, but it's no longer serving you anymore. So just take them on face value. They think being paranoid and being like double masking and just, over sanitizing things, they thought that was helping them. And they they'll keep on that. They developed a trauma personality that they won't be able to drop. And now we have this new form of mental illness, which will never get named, which has been a product of the past 2 years, which is people who are afraid of the air, afraid of other people, afraid of just,
touching and anything.
Yeah, something invisible. It's mass formation psychosis. It's not going to go away.
So let's dive into it. Let's define C-PTSD, complex PTSD, because that's what millions, and I would say billions of people are dealing with. Most of them don't even know that they're suffering on it, because there are all these kind of trauma responses and avoidances and checking out, fight and flight, disassociating, and addictions. So most people, again, I say this over and over again, are traumatized, but that they don't know that they're traumatized, right?
Exactly. So there's like PTSD, which is like, and not all of the events I'm about to list as PTSD have to be a PTSD besides war, but it's like abuse, rape, serious like medical injuries, a car accident, like that's like a one-off event. That's the traditional definition of PTSD. But complex PTSD, which is sometimes also called developmental trauma, is basically ongoing relationship trauma. And developmental trauma is when it happens in childhood, and then complex PTSD was when it happens continuing into adulthood, basically. So it happens in relationship, essentially. So, when traumatic events happen and stress in life becomes overwhelming, it works on similar ways in the body and brain. It makes us disassociate. It makes it get into fight or flight. We have flashbacks, we have fawn response, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But regardless of how it shows up in you, this relational trauma creates a disconnection from our true self in the process. So that to me is a distinguishing factor of complex PTSD and developmental trauma. We disconnect from self. So that's the most important thing. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about how this kind of shows up. And I'm reading actually, these are words I just Googled off a website. Her name is Meg John Barker, and she really defines it well. She's referring to Pete Walker's work on this, and she says, CPSD occurs when we internalize a sense of ourselves as unacceptable as a child due to how we're responded to by the world around us. Pete Walker talks of a shift from a child believing I make mistakes to I am a mistake. So the behavior turns into identity. The shaming we experience from others, whatever form that takes, becomes an inner sense that we are shameful. Such children develop a vicious inner critic voice, which they're always trying to please.
So I just want to, on a reference, because that's Pete Walker. What's the name of this book? And
Complex PTSD.
And he just came out with the new one, no? Didn't he?
No, that's the developmental trauma
Oh,
author.
it's something else. Sorry.
Yeah.
But what it reminds me of from I Make a Mistake to I Am a Mistake, that also we had a podcast episode about this as well, because complex PTSD also relates to unconscious internalized shame.
Yes.
Right? Based on John Bradshaw's work.
The affect, so the emotional tone of the inner critic is always shame. So whether you have a strong inner critic or outer critic, it's always shame-based. And it's shame-based identity, actually. Yeah. So instead of thinking, I made a mistake, I'm a bad person.
Like you are flawed.
Something's wrong with me. Something's fundamentally wrong with me. That's the belief.
Okay.
And then she continues, often emotional expression is punished or shamed, meaning that children don't learn how to regulate their emotions or experience them in a positive way. They can also find other people's emotions overwhelming and frightening too. There is often a sense of not being loved or liked by those around them. Totally can relate to that. And or love disappearing suddenly. And or of it being very contingent on only behaving in some ways and others. So all of this
in light
happened,
of COVID,
yes, that's what I mean. That is why this is really fascinating. So because it's too risky for kids to believe that those around them are in any way dangerous, they tend to protect those people by taking all the responsibility for what's happening on themselves. So that's how it's going to show up. So basically, you know, the shaming that we experience from others over the past years can actually create, it can also target already existing complex PTSD, which I've seen a lot of people have as well. But it can basically amplify this idea as I am shameful. It can amplify our own inner critic, especially if we, are kind of a people-pleasing type of person. And also, you know, it does create a sense of not being loved or liked by those around us, or that love can easily disappear, or it's very contingent on us only getting the vax. Like that's kind of what's happened.
Well, let's dissect this a little bit. Like you mentioned, you know, emotional expression is punished or shamed, right? So basically when, you know, express a certain thing for yourself, well, I don't believe in that. I feel different. This is not, you know, the true story. I have certain questions about this so-called pandemic, maybe even about virus isolation and what these official authorities tell us, you know, even about allopathic medicine. Yeah. And like, no, you know, not only you're being shamed for your beliefs in gaslight, really being personally attacked.
Yes.
Right? Or shamed like, oh my God, if you have these views, you endanger other people. Right?
You're dangerous. You're vilified. You're a racist, a white supremacist.
Exactly, all of that. Yeah. And then also you're punished. Punished how? Yeah. People lost their jobs, right? Yeah. Who didn't go along with it, who didn't want to go, you know, take the jab or anything, or punished by their own families by disowning their own children or the parents or families or divorces, marriages, and all of that. Has tremendous psychological repercussions.
Exactly. So like it was basically, so for people who are already, you know, if you had parents who rejected you, who criticized you, who emotionally, physically, sexually abused you, there's more likelihood that you were already carrying some aspect of complex PTSD. So basically, if we don't get attuned to, if we don't get that secure attachment, if we don't get that acceptance from our parents at all the developmental stages we need it, we develop these adaptive strategies. We develop these basically false personalities in order to get along with the world. And same thing happened this year. So I see that with a lot of people, their own traumas got basically triggered. You know, I think there was a new wave of it as well. So here's some of the signs that characterizes, according to Pete Walker, C-PTSD. So emotional flashbacks. So when you get like really triggered and you just get so flooded by like fight, flight, freeze, or some strong emotion, that's an emotional flashback. And that's the past coming back into the present. So you got to like always ask yourself, is the level that I'm upset match the situation? Sometimes you think you might justify it and think it is, but generally speaking, you know, this is when emotions are like out of a 10 above a 4 and you're really getting flooded. Being highly critical of ourselves and others. So that's really interesting as well to think about, because how many people had this super strong outer critic come out where they were just being like, you're not masking properly, you're not doing enough, you're not far enough away from me, you know?
So that's also based, when we talk about trauma and PTSD, their own inner critic, what they have always had in themselves, how they feel about themselves is then being used through this situation, through this authoritarian programming to criticize and shame others, to become an authoritarian onto others.
Yeah, so if you're like overly outwardly critical towards another person, that is a projection towards your own inner critic.
Right.
Where your inner critic has gotten so like suppressed and awful for your psyche to face that you can only experience it when you criticize others. And I have that actually. I mean, Bernhard can tell you when I get into my moments, you know, because I have a super strong inner critic. And the inner critic, basically, the main emotion that the inner critic brings up is toxic shame. So when we're spiraling into toxic shame over doing something we thought was wrong or something about ourselves, you know, that's an inner critic attack. So just to know that those two are really intimately linked. Abandoning ourselves. So this means that like not speaking up for how you feel, what you think, what your needs are, and just sacrificing your own self to please others. That's a key aspect. So then also think about how active that has been over the past couple of years.
Well, that goes also along with people who are just afraid to stand up because, you know, because they're afraid of the repercussions. So they're banning themselves. There's a split internally, not listening to the true self, to standing up for how they truly feel and see.
Exactly.
But put on a mask to appease to others, to not rock the boat. And that friction itself also causes trauma.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's the key piece. And they're not actually as afraid of the consequences of what could happen most of the time as they're afraid of this toxic shame spiral that would come from the outside world.
Right.
So like you abandon yourself to live what other people want you to do. And anxiety, so this is another point, anxiety and or struggles around social situations or relationships, loneliness or feeling abandoned, disassociation, being checked out, distracting or numbing yourself with food, drink, worrying, social media, TV.
I want to address. So again, these are signs and symptoms of complex PTSD.
Yeah.
This is a big one. That's why I mean this disassociation part, or checked out, or distracting yourself, or numbing with food, drink, working, social media, TV, whatever, video games, all of that, porn, whatever it may be. That's why I mean that most people are traumatized, but don't know they're traumatized because they're disassociated and they just distract themselves from these uncomfortable feelings through these means.
Exactly. Feeling bad about ourselves, so low self-esteem, self-loathing. That was a really big one for me to untangle, is like, you know, even in contrast to evidence that proves the contrary, I carry this belief that I'm a bad person, that something's inherently wrong with me. And I couldn't figure it out. I was like almost like this like stain on my soul. And then, you know, through doing my own therapy and my own inner work, that was exactly the way that my parents treated me. So you internalize the way that your parents treat you, and then that becomes the basis of your self-esteem. That's such a key piece, because if you have bad self-esteem, it actually doesn't have anything to do with how pretty you are, how talented you are, or whatever. It has to do with you not having been seen enough in childhood and had that secure attachment and have internalized those good feelings about yourself.
Exactly. So you already have that childhood wound, that trauma based on this upbringing.
Yeah.
Based on your parents not seeing you, shaming you for where you feel, for not, attentively listening, of not mirroring positively.
Yeah.
And then you get the same from who? The other parent, which is government or mother, the toxic mother, the big brother or government, and authoritarianism and corporations and all of that, the authority, right? Who do exactly the same to you. So
that's a good point.
Like you mentioned, it's not just this new trauma is being installed, but it compounds on trauma many people have already suffered in childhood.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So these interparental relationships, we also project on the outer world. So the easiest way to understand that is we project onto men, our relationships with our father, and women, our relationships with our mother, typically speaking, you know. So we want to also understand that all of these developmental traumas can then become the basis of our projections towards other people. Big mood changes and struggles with feelings, difficulties in relationships, and then being easily triggered into the 4 Fs, which are fight, flight, freeze, and then he talks about fawn. And I'll just touch a little bit on the somatic experiences of this as well, just really fast. So hypervigilance, this is a very common one. So constantly scanning your environment for danger. That's a trauma response. So if you tend to do that with people like Coach, just when you go out, if you're constantly looking for, oh my God, am I the only one without a mask? Like, that could be a complex PTSD trauma response of what happened over the past couple of years.
Or the other side, a lot of people go in the grocery stores, kind of mask up with gloves, like completely, extremely hyper vigilant and seeing viruses everywhere. And on that note, I can see many people, especially seen through the lies, they're fed up with it. We can also, and I've experienced it, get angry at people who are still masked or wearing masks or had these kind of intense safety measures and just, based on this on the program. But you have to understand they're running a program and they're acting from deep trauma. So it doesn't mean to just go along with them and cater to them, but there needs to be a level of compassion that to see why they're doing what they're doing. And they're not connected to self. They cannot think for themselves. They're programmed beings under a trauma response, and that's just the way it is. And unfortunately, and I'll go way deeper into that also in the second hour, that the whole point of traumatizing people from a matrix perspective is because you can control them easier that way. Why?
Yes,
because they disassociate, they're disconnected from their true self, hence they're disconnected from their own inner guidance, from their inner discernment, from their own intuition, and hence they are more chained and want more other people or the authority to tell them what to do. And because of their own insecurity, then they project it and impose it onto others. But it's important to understand that these program people acting from a trauma response, from a deeply, like MK Ultra military level mind programming, mind control. So getting angry at them doesn't help at all. It only feeds the matrix frequency.
Yes. And, even hyper focusing on people that are like still going along with it can be your own trauma response as well. Like just ignore them. Why are you focusing on the one person in the store who has a mask on? I'm talking to myself, actually. Okay. So.
I can relate.
Okay, so a few more somatic bodily experiences that are common to CPTSD. I'm just listing these so that people can actually use them as a way of telling, do I have some after these past couple of years, or have I always had some? Shallow breathing, feeling adrenaline a lot of the time, feeling physically armored up and braced for trouble. So like your muscles are tight, back pain. And then also just kind of like, wear and tear from how much you're armored up or you're rushing all the time. That rushing all the time thing is also a symptom of hypervigilance, struggling to stay present, relaxed and grounded in your body, sleep problems, exaggerated startle responses. So like I have that as well. Digestive problems and self-harm as well. I think that's one I don't see that much as many anymore, but keep in mind that self-harm is also addictions and overeating and stuff like that as well. Yeah,
and also suicides have skyrocketed. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, exactly.
The ultimate self-harm.
So I'm again going to be referring to this article. Meg John Barker wrote it, just referring to Pete Walker's work in complex PTSD. And she said the 4 Fs are the 4 different responses that all animals, including humans who are part animal, when something traumatic happens to them: fight, flight, freeze, fawn. So fight is when we attack back. So when you're in a trauma response, if you tend to attack back, that's you're a fight response person. Flight is when we try to escape, we leave, we check out, we ignore. Freeze is when we go still and go frozen. And fawn is when you try to appease the attacker to get out of the situation. So in CPTSD, one or more of these generally become our entrenched survival strategies, the way we learn to relate to ourselves, others, and the world. And we use these strategies to try and meet our yearning to experience the kind of love we always wanted, to avoid getting abandoned, to try and not feel overwhelming feelings. Needless to say, they are not helpless strategies for achieving these aims. But a lot of people use them, basically. So fight, if you're a fight type, so this is one character strategy, survival strategy of PTSD. This means you try to control others. You demand things from them. You blame them for any relationship problems other than looking at your piece in it. Or you try to fix them, or you criticize and attack them. Flight response means you just try and be the perfect person. You just try and make yourself worthy of love to other people, or you work very hard to just be perfect. So you're abandoning yourself in that moment. Freeze.
Sorry, real quick. That also relate to codependency and people pleaser.
For sure. Yes, exactly. So freeze involves hiding, retreating, keeping intimacy at a distance, disassociating, and distracting. So this means like you just avoid relationships entirely. Like you just check out basically. Fawn involves people pleasing. So focusing on other needs other than our own, trying to make ourselves into what we think others want us to be. So flight and fawn are very much overlapping because basically fawn is also a type of freeze response, flight response. It's a type of like still a nervous system activation thing. And, this person, this Meg woman, Barker woman continues, she says, all 4 strategies have something that's helpful for us if we can cultivate them all and go into them appropriately. So that's the key point. Fight enables us to be assertive and hold our boundaries. Flight means that we can disengage and be industrious and endure things. Freeze means that we take time to retreat, to be mindful and present. Fawn is about loving and serving people, to compromising and listening. So we don't want to get rid of any of these aspects of ourselves. We just want to use them more intelligently. But a lot of people, they do the opposite. So they just do it. They fawn all the time and they freeze all the time, or they're flight all the time, or they fight all the time. So, and Pete Walker says that, it's kind of a spectrum. So if you're a fawn type, you actually need to learn how to fight and make boundaries a little bit better. And I won't touch on all of them, but another really important one is the freeze type. So the freeze type really needs to understand the cost of isolation and reaching out for therapeutic relationships, finding healing relationships, whether it's friends, pets, support groups, whatever. You need to learn the cost of actually isolating yourself, basically. And so, we just want to reflect on how these past couple years has impacted us, has impacted the way that we show up in our relationships, and how we can look at healing that. Because I think that the most important thing for us actually is to come back into our true selves, to come back into regulation, to slow things down, to simplify our lives a little bit. And I'm not saying that whatever the craziness of the world isn't over. I totally understand how there's lots of places that are still demanding it. People have lost their jobs. There's so much to clean up here. But we also want to take really good care of our own nervous systems and how this affected us relationally. Because if we don't do some aspect of healing ourselves and how this affected how we relate to the world, then this is going to just be even more fuel for the next divide and conquer agenda and another trauma. And as they keep layering on more psyops, more people will get disassociated and the world will just get more and more chaotic. So
yeah, I want to just add on what you just mentioned, because it's very important, these 4F responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And as you mentioned, it's important to understand there's nothing wrong with these responses. They are a natural part, actually, as a protection mechanism. When traumatic events happen, you need to sometimes get into a healthy fight or flight response.
Yes.
Sometimes a fawn response or a freeze response. That's a natural adaptation to deal with danger and traumatic events, to help us survive. Mm-hmm. So it's very important. There's nothing wrong with them, right?
Exactly.
The issue, especially if humans, comes in. If we get stuck, it becomes internalized, unconscious. We don't process it.
You get stuck there.
And we get stuck there, even over lifetimes. By the way, that's a whole other topic when we look into evolutionary astrology, how we can carry over trauma over lifetimes and then gets reactivated in a current life. Yeah. Or childhood trauma gets activated in our adult life, because we've never processed it. And like you mentioned, we project unconsciously a past situation into the present.
Exactly.
Right. So that's really important to understand.
And it's like, if you get good at reading the signs of fight, flight, and freeze in yourself, and then seeing what it looks like in yourself, then you see it in the world. And it literally looks like the person is being chased by a tiger, but they're just in the grocery store, or they're just in the car, but their nervous system is in that state. And it's just wild to witness, actually. Like, we see in people who are in a freeze state all the time, and they don't even know that they are. They're just like eyes wide, like super checked out. All of these are aspects of the freeze state. So, yeah.
So, For example, I was thinking of the fight response. When you get really angry at somebody, for wearing a mask or going like, what I mean? And, that anger may actually result, as I've seen on TikTok, YouTube videos and whatnot, where people really get in fist fights.
Yeah.
Because of wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, that's actually coming from a trauma response.
Yeah.
Right? You're just trying to ease a pain by projecting this on somebody else and
a fight trauma response.
Fight trauma response.
Yeah.
And nothing is going to change by doing that.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but if listening as you were reading through these different F responses, I would say that the majority of people, based on the past 2 years of the gaslighting, whatever happened on the collective level, are suffering from a fawn response.
Yes.
Right? Because
freeze too.
Freeze and fawn, because especially fawn involves like becoming this authoritarian follower, right? Becoming a people pleaser and just going along with the program.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and one just more last important piece about complex PTSD is he says how important it is for verbal ventilation, meaning if you're pissed off about something that happened in the world or your relationships, can you just find a way to verbally ventilate it? Ideally saying it out loud, because that's the most powerful, I think, because then it creates a somatic experience of you actually expressing your feelings. But if that's really hard for you, you could at least write it down. And this will help you release some of the painful feelings. It will help you air out some of the grievances you've had, So when you let yourself finally speak all the things that you wanted to say, it can be extremely healing. So, this might be part of the process, especially if you're someone who went the past couple years not being able to say anything about it. So verbal ventilation is such a good practice.
Okay, let's not mistake verbal ventilation with going off on somebody. No.
This is done consciously with a coach, with a therapist, with a trusted friend, even just to yourself, alone, in your diary. It's done consciously. So you do this so you don't actually lose it on that person in front of you.
On that note, it reminds me of it's also healthy to speak. We talked about the past 2 years. It was so much a litmus test of, especially in so-called spiritual wellness health circles who went along with all this program and the jab, and nobody spoke out, nobody questioned. In fact, they shamed anybody who started to question it on top of it. So it was a litmus test who was standing where. But we've also seen, almost with a disappointment, a lot of people who know what's going on but didn't say anything because maybe they're more concerned about.
No, because they were in a fawn response.
They were in a foreign. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, But what I'm saying is like exactly what I want to reference what you mentioned. Actually, speaking out and making your voice heard, despite of the backlash, what you experience, is actually a healthy. Will boost your immune system. Is a healthy response.
If you're a fawn person,
right? In general, I'm talking in general. If you know the truth, because then there's no split between the way you portray yourself externally and the way you truly feel within yourself.
Yeah. But I have to say people don't do that because they tend to go into freeze and fawn, which fawn is also a freeze response. Yeah. So like if people who, I can see this in a lot of people who were scared to, they most likely had unacknowledged complex PTSD that was getting in the way. And I also have complex PTSD. I have all sorts of exaggerated startle responses, weird fears that come up, catastrophizing, all sorts of stuff. But I have to say, it actually helped me heal a lot of that trauma by speaking out, because a lot of my own way, my pattern with the general consensus, the world, was fawn. So let me talk about how to repair the relationships, because I really want to make sure we get into this, okay?
Okay.
So first of all, do you even want to repair this relationship? Do you guys have similar values? Like, first ask yourself that, because I've noticed in a lot of people, a lot of the relationships that left their lives, they were kind of ready to let go of anyway. And they were just friends with them out of comfort. They've known them for a while or whatever, They didn't have similar values. They've been growing apart. So that's the first question.
Real quick, just when we talk about relationships, so we're talking about all relationships. Intimate relationship, be it boyfriend, girlfriend.
Yeah, I'm talking about
marriage,
all of them. Yeah.
Family,
totally,
friends, work colleagues, all of them.
Exactly. Okay, so the first part, ask yourself, do I even want to repair this relationship? And really connect to your heart and really answer that question authentically. Okay, so how to begin the repair if the answer is yes? So if the answer is no, then grieving the relationship, processing your feelings about it, maybe verbally ventilating everything you want to say, writing them a letter, just grieving it would be your work. So the answer is yes, and you do want to repair. the first thing I would recommend is actually process the feelings you have towards that person. So if they said some really awful, nasty things or whatever, and you're really feeling triggered or charged or even maybe freeze about it, it's important you find a way that you can let those emotions out. So depending on the emotion, if you're angry, you might need to like punch a pillow, write an angry letter. If you're sad, you might need to cry. If you're just frozen about it, then you just got to regulate your nervous system and learn tools to calm yourself down, So that's the first thing, is because I know that a lot of people are holding a lot of unprocessed feelings over some things that were said and done over the past couple of years. So just do your part to work with those feelings. You're going to say something?
Yeah, it reminds me also, it's really important, you make a good point, to process these feelings without just letting them be, and you can, test it on yourself. If still have any anger and resentment towards somebody, or you feel very disappointed and hurt and sad, that's a strong sign to process these emotions. Because if you don't, it goes into the unconscious, can create all kinds of more trauma,
disease, and
compounded on trauma. Even can result in illnesses later on. So it's important to process these emotions and truly let go. And how do you know when you truly have a processed relationship and let go? If you see this person or the name comes up, whatever, be it in person or on social media, whatnot, and you do not have an emotional response, but you're more really like objectively, seeing the other person and don't have a strong emotional
you can have
reaction.
some emotions, but not an overly, like activated one, basically.
Exactly.
And when we say process feelings, like, I know this can sound kind of vague for people. So for me, a big way of doing that has been yoga, meditation, massage. I also do this practice, which is basically, if you check out the book Letting Go by David Hawkins, he refers to this practice called the Letting Go practice, where you just feel the feelings you're feeling in your body with no resistance, breathe into it, let it go. Some feelings can be way more sticky than that, though. Some feelings you may need to actually talk about it to a therapist, speak what you really want to say to them out loud. It might need deeper work than that. So just keep in mind, too, just thinking about that since we're talking about relational trauma, the fastest track to healing it would be into a safe therapeutic relationship, hands down, because there's just something magic about, like, even when I was going through this, when I spoke to my own therapist, I was talking about being canceled, the jab or whatever. Actually, I was lucky because he was on the same page and I finally had someone to talk to about it, so I didn't feel so alone. So there's something very healing about doing it with someone else. You're going to say something?
Yeah, I don't know. You made it go. That's another issue which I think we talked about in a past episode about awake from being woke. The problem nowadays as well, again, with, if a lot of people need therapy, in-person work, trauma work and all of that. And unfortunately, a lot of therapists, they go along with that agenda. They just, blindly believe everything. Or they've become woke.
Yeah, so I found a good resource for that. Maybe we can put it in the notes somewhere, where it's basically a search engine of conservative therapists, but they're not all conservative, but they are therapists who will not push ideology on you.
That's
so they're conservative friendly. And I'm not saying I'm not a conservative, but that's what you want to be looking for. Is you don't want to, you can tell red flags on a lot of these woke therapist websites, so that they advertise it. So, okay, I want to continue on. Okay, how to begin to repair, process the feelings. Second, look at the part you may have played in it. Did you say some awful things? Do you need to also apologize as well? That's really important that you own your part and you don't go into just wanting to blame them. Experiment with saying what you really want to say with a safe person. So a therapist, a coach, even a friend, and then decide, what kind of relationship am I looking for with them now? Manage your expectations. If you know that they're not typically an emotionally vulnerable person, but you got to say this to them, then don't expect for them to just give you like, oh, thank you, and it'll all be good. That would be amazing if that happened, and I hope that it does for you. But just manage your expectations. Think about who you're dealing with. Think about their history when you've been vulnerable before. Has it gone well? So you want to manage your expectations around this. And then the repair. So basically, repair is like super huge for keeping your relationship basically vital and full of intimacy. Because if you're not saying it, then it's going under the surface and you're avoiding talking to them, and your emotional connection with that person is slowly dying, the less you're willing to actually engage in healthy conflict with them, essentially. So the most important thing, so if you find someone, you're going to have a conversation with them, try and enter the space from a non-activated place. So if you're really anxious or really angry at them still, that's a sign that it might be a good idea for you to just find a way to process those feelings using any of the things that I just suggested, basically. And then you can't also be high on what John Gottman calls the 4 horsemen. So you can't go into it with criticism, contempt, defensiveness, or stonewalling. It's not going to work. So if you're coming in very defensive, you're coming in, you're about to criticize them, you just feel really awful towards them, like, oh my God, I can't believe they did this. You've been stonewalling them, it's not going to work. And so say that's not, you're in a good mood, you're ready to enter the conversation. So see if you can break the ice by first saying something funny, something, you appreciate, asking them a question about themselves, like build a little bit of relational rapport before you get into it. Or say, you can even say that you miss talking to them, or say something vulnerable coming from your heart, acknowledging that you appreciate them and you want to make a connection with them. It's called a soften startup. And then begin with being vulnerable and owning your part. So being like, hey, this was crazy past couple years. Talk about what you want to say to them and what your part could have been in it. Even if it was a small part, just own your part. And then, listen to the other person as well and try and understand where they're coming from. So really listen from where until they feel understood. This doesn't mean you agree with them. So this can be the hardest part. So they might say, oh, I thought you were just a crazy, radical, anti-vax or whatever, Just see if you can just listen to them without agreeing with them. So regulate, take deep breaths, being like, I can hear this person without agreeing with them. And then, there can be all sorts of nuance in it. We're not going to go in too depth, but you really want to do this, listening until they feel understood. Ideally, they also listen until you feel understood. If they're a great relationship for you, they should be able to do that to some extent. Just talk to them until you can create a soothing moment. So until there's like a moment of connection, you feel heard, and then you want to just show appreciation to them for being authentic with you, And so that's just a mini version of what you can do. And so in case it gets heated and you get very triggered and you notice you're going to fight, flight, freeze, or even fawn, or they start crossing boundaries, they start calling you names, yelling, really important. The repair can't happen in that space. So ask for a timeout and be like, and let them know, don't just stonewall, let them know, hey, I need a timeout. I really want to finish this conversation, but I'm just feeling really flooded emotionally. I can't speak in this place. Speak from an I place, and then tell them how long you need before you're going to check in with them again. So make a verbal promise that you're going to return back to them and that you really want to keep going, talking about this. So that's kind of a mini thing that you can do to the relationships that are available for that. And then keep in mind at the end, depending on if you guys can repair, that will depend on if the relationship can survive this kind of conflict, because good relationships will know how to deal with conflict and repair effectively after. You have to be comfortable doing this as much as possible. And so there might be even multiple pieces to repair. So you might need to have multiple conversations if this person is closer to you, but you really want to just come in with a desire to actually create connection and to be vulnerable.
Yeah, excellent. Great breakdown. And that's easier said than done. We see it sometimes even in our relationship.
Yes.
Right. But I want to share a little bit from my own vulnerability. I can talk a bit about a repair I went through with my parents. Because I went through all these stages. I did it the wrong way, the right way, and anything in between. And it's exactly about this topic. So, my parents are living in Germany. And in Germany, actually, from what I understand, the COVID measures and all of that has been way more severe than here in the US, at least at the time being. So, obviously having me as their son, I've tried to red pill them for the past 20 years about various topics.
Yeah.
So one great thing, and my parents are also not young anymore. My dad is in his 80s, my mom in her late 70s. Well, at least they see through the 9/11.
Oh, really?
Well, my dad is an engineer. My dad is is intelligent, very left brain, very logical. But if you can present a case, he will take his time to look into it. But with 9/11 as an engineer, it didn't pan out to him that the official story is true. It just didn't make sense on the basic physics level.
Yeah.
So, on that level, that's as far as you can go. So at least not knowing what happened, but definitely not going along with the official story. But anyway, so with the whole COVID thing happened, obviously I was on my parents' case right away because I was also concerned as a son. I didn't want them to get vaccinated.
Yeah.
Right. Because we know of the detrimental effects and all of that, of the vaccine and whatnot. And there has been even death cases in their own friend circle of even more younger persons in their 30s or 40s who got the jab and then coincidentally
had a stroke,
died of a heart, what's it called, blood clot in the heart.
Oh, wow.
So just a couple of weeks later.
Yeah.
So there was definitely concern. But I can be also my thing with my Mars and Aries, as you know, I'm a very confrontational. I'm not the one to shy away from conflict. I'm the opposite. I need to choose my battles wisely. And the problem with, maybe listeners can relate to that, when you get into arguments or try to convince your family members, all the other, especially parents, all the other shit gets activated as well, comes compounded into it, right, from the past.
Yeah.
So it's not like having an objective conversation. It gets emotionally very easily. So, I was very concerned. I tried to red pill. I pushed information on my parents, which they weren't even really able to absorb, so to speak. So I went against my own, how can you say, almost like, value in terms of you cannot push information on others. They have to ask and, be externally considerate. It's didn't do it that much with my parents. So I was just kind of telling them all of that. And they kind of then shut down a bit. And last year kind of conveyed to me or almost admitted to me that they got the vax, but didn't tell me. They were afraid to tell me because of what I would say. And the main reason they got it, especially early 2021, because they were, they traveled, they were not able to go anywhere, even to supermarkets or cultural events, theaters, all what my parents enjoy. So they took the, how do you say, the carrot, so to speak. Well, if you want to engage in social life again, you need to take the jab. Mm-hmm. So they got it. And I got very, very upset. I got very angry. And obviously the way I reacted wasn't well received by my parents.
You got angry with them on the phone now?
On the phone. Yeah, it happened on the phone or FaceTime or something,
exactly,
and I was just screaming at him and like going down, just really angry. And anger, but you could say came from a well-meaning intent. The anger was also what is underneath the anger. Well, concern for my parents.
Fear.
Right? Fear, that something may happen to them.
Yeah.
But it kind of escalated and, my parents were not able to take it in because they were really upset. So they, after they hang up the phone, my dad's like, we cannot do this anymore. Like, we don't want to hear from you for the next few weeks, 4 weeks or something.
They
stonewalled me well, as a reaction of me pushing, going, being really angry at them, which then ironically triggered my childhood trauma of being stonewalled before, and the abandonment wound came up.
Your C-PTSD, actually.
Exactly. That's what happened. And what kind of response did I get? And I usually get into freeze, right?
Freeze, yeah. Or fawn.
Yeah.
Like you didn't try. Yeah.
I mean,
you got more into freeze, I think, because you just like got into severe abandonment, like fear. I think that was more freeze.
Yeah. And also was processing it emotionally though. I got deep into processing my sadness, was crying, all of that, very confused. Having said that, I had to just respect the boundary, because in the past I would just kind of crawl back and trying to.
You would fawn.
Trying to please them.
People
exactly.
Please,
I just had to respect them, but also like understand, like, and the key point is like, they don't have the emotional tools. They don't know how to process trauma. Yes, they maybe shouldn't have stonewalled me and whatnot, but that was their reaction to what I did. So like what you mentioned, in any relationship, I need to have to look into what my part in it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Even though you could see actually the way that they were handling it was not relationally like safe.
Was not, no.
Like, but you knew better. That's
it
why
reacted.
You had to,
I did my child what they already did, even in my childhood, which was like kind of stonewalling.
Which is a key thing, is that if you know better, it is actually up to you to kind of take the high road.
Exactly,
sometimes.
And I didn't. So I had to own this on myself. Well, that's and then I felt bad. I had to watch out that I don't. punish myself, because then I felt really bad at myself, about having done that, so to speak. So it was a whole process I had to go through internally. But then a few weeks later, I also wrote a nice email like, hey, understanding where they're coming from, and really what you just mentioned, really understanding their situation, right? What they're subjected to, right? Understanding where they're coming from, regardless of what I think is the truth and whatnot, and here and there, right? So, so I brought it, really help. What really helped is like when I conveyed to them how I understood where they were coming from, and I made my sincere amends, right? Not apologizing for like my views, but for my approach. That was the main key.
Yeah.
And that really helped them to come better understanding. And that since then, I was being more level-headed. I also kind of like just don't push information onto them, just let them be. It's their free will in the end of the day. I said what I said. I cannot control them, right?
Yeah.
But through this repair now, and we have a really better relationship now, really on an emotional level, they are no more receptive. And now recently, with everything's happening in the world, in Germany, they put another push for another vax round. And all I said, hey, texted my dad, I hope you guys not going to go for another round. It's a lot of nonsense out there. You guys know my position, but you need to do what you need to do for yourself. And he replied, yes, definitely. We're not going to go along with that anymore. Right.
That's good. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So they got their 1 or 2 shots. That was it. At the very beginning, thankfully, nothing happened to them, at least on a physical level. They're also really, my parents are very physically active. They take care of themselves. They're in good shape for their age.
Yeah. So this is also just an inspiring story, because it can happen with the right relationships. And even if it's not like perfect and they did stonewall you, or they said things, or you said things that you regret, it's always possible. Like, we want to be careful not to abandon relationships that are repairable during these times, and also being able to let go of the ones that are too. Because I think many of us, we've made many new friends throughout the past couple of years. I know if I've connected with people who I probably wouldn't have connected to otherwise. And like, in spite of it, there's been this amazing unification happening too.
Yes, exactly. It's almost a weird paradox. We have like, deeper healing and repairs happening, but there's also still the splitting of humanity happening at the same time. So on that note, this is the end of the first hour. And the second hour, we go much deeper, because we still have to consider one thing didn't go away, and that's that over half of the population of humanity has become vaccinated. So we're going to look deeper into the metaphysical, spiritual consequences. And I want to dive deeper, make more points, and, put it in more perspective, so to speak, and what we can do about that. And also looking into the bigger picture, what's happening in the world beyond COVID, and where this all may leading would or will, also in light of the climate change scare and all of that. And yes, if you want to have access to the second hour and you are not already a member, please go to my website, veilofreality.com, and there you can sign up to the membership, and you will get access to all the second parts of the episodes of the podcast. A lot of stuff we cannot really talk about in the first hour for obvious reasons. With that being said, thank you for listening, and see you on the other side.